When it comes to navigating the education system, a lot of people don't know a lot of things about it because there is a lot to know, and very few people know everything there is to know. And I'm telling you, as someone who worked there, even the department, certain departments in education or the special ed department, they don't have all the answers either. Because I know firsthand that you would ask them questions they're supposed to know, and they would say they don't know, or they wouldn't respond, or they give you other answers or other options to avoid the thing you're asking because they don't know what to do about it. So, but it's just because it's a lot of information. I do think there's people who are well versed and know what they're good at their jobs. It's just a lot to know and to remember, and so much of it can be unique to the individual. Okay, like most things in life, right? So even for the information I put out on the internet, some of it may apply, pieces of it may apply, one or two things may apply, or none of it could apply. But then there's other people that everything was exactly what they needed to hear and helped them tremendously. Okay, so this is another video I would strongly suggest you take notes because it's going to be a lot of information, like most of my videos, because they are educational, and I'm not at a place where I put all the stuff on the screen. So one day we shall get there, and I'll give you visuals, but you can pause it, write it, things like that, so that you know ahead of time if you want to pause it now and get you a pen or paper. I think this conversation would be great for a Venn diagram. If you're not sure, because this could be culturally specific, when it's the two circles that overlap, where you put there's one thing, another thing that are different, and in the middle, where the circles overlap, you put how they're similar, just so you can have a better visual of and organizing your thoughts to understand, like, oh, okay, certain questions are related to this, certain language is related to this, and things like that. Okay, so I hope you're ready. So we're going to talk about 504 versus SpEd. SpEd is short for special education, but that's a big, those are two big words. So we just say SpEd, okay? SpEd and 504. People like to use these words interchangeably, like most things I talk about, and they're very different. They're two different, very different programs that run different ways, and how you qualify for them is different. It's just not the same. But people, again, because it's a lot of information, and sometimes schools don't make it clear in meetings of what's going on, people will call everything special education. And then because special education has a stigma, this is why I'm just say SpEd because I have a list. But because SpEd can have a stigma where people find shame or like, oh, I'm not in special ed, a lot of times people don't know what all makes them part of special ed, because you could be in special ed and have classes with everybody else, contrary to popular belief, especially now with inclusion. There was a time special education children would have a separate classroom and separate teachers, but now in current day, a lot of them have general education classrooms with everyone else. So the peers amongst them would not know unless there's like some obvious differences, whether the way they look or the way they speak. Sometimes it is noticeable, but there's a lot of invisible disabilities, okay? And there's a lot of invisible disabilities that can fall under 504 and SpEd. So let's talk about, I'm going to read my notes. Some of this you could probably look up, but it will be longer format. But if you want more information about it, I definitely would advise you to do your research, but look up um, government or federal websites, or for your state or for your district, not just a simple Google search of people's opinions or Reddit. Somebody on Reddit might have been able to give you a brief overview of it, but for detailed, I would tell you to look up the official websites for the Department of Education to get a play by play of what it all entails, because I'm not going to get that detailed. I'm going to give you a brief definition and some examples so you can compare the two. So, what is 504? Students covered under 504, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It supports students to remove barriers of learning. It covers conditions that limit daily activities in a major way. And they receive accommodations, not modifications. Um, and so the difference between accommodations and modifications is you're changing how they learn, not what they learn, to address specific challenges. So in 504, you accommodate their learning needs, by, do they just need more time? You're accommodating because they're a slow test taker, or they have slower processing time, depending on the disability in which they qualify for 504. They just need maybe to take the test in a room without someone else. Maybe they need somebody to read the questions to them. Those are accommodations. You are accommodating their disability. You're not changing what they're learning or how they're learning it, but that is not probably standard for all the other kids. That's why it's considered an intervention or an accommodation, because all the other kids can probably read it to themselves and be fine. All the other kids can complete it in the standard time needed to complete this task, but this kid, for whatever reason, needs all day or a couple days or whatever. So you can change the environment, you can change presentation of curriculum, or presentation of the information. So what that means is, like I said, they may take a test somewhere else, um, or get pulled out for certain things, for one-on-one time or small group time, just to complete the task, the assignment, or the assessment, because their disability affects them being able to perform well in their classroom setting. The presentation of curriculum means that it can change. You may accommodate them by maybe the pictures they have, or sometimes the number of answer choices they have. Like, if every kid has 4 answer choices, this person might get 3. It's the same 3 other kids everybody else has 2, but a fourth one that would have not been an answer is removed. So it increases them chances, because some people have visual issues. Some people, that amount of information can make things harder for them. So again, you're just kind of adjusting what they're doing that fits their needs, but they're still required to take the same test for the most part over the same things that everybody else is doing. Or you present how it's you change how the information is presented. So again, that could be pictures or slideshows. Maybe they watch additional videos on how to do certain things because they just need the extra help. So kids under 504, or students under 504, because this can go with them into college. Students under 504, they get service plans, not IEPs. You may hear it as a service plan or a 504 plan. And it's literally just a plan. This is what their disability is. This is how we're going to accommodate them in the learning environment so that they can be successful, or to optimize their potential of academic performance. Okay. Special education, also known as SpEd, is different, more complicated, way more meetings, way more signatures, way more paperwork, way more conversations, way more people. It's just a lot. It's a lot. But it's that way because it's a lot it's supposed to do to help the child be successful. So what is SpEd? SpEd is the practice of educating students in a way that addresses their individual differences and special needs. So this involves individually planned and systematically monitored arrangements of teaching procedures, adapted equipment and materials, and accessible settings through the use of co-teachers, pullouts, and push-ins. And so how that is different, if you're like, what does that mean? So remember when I mentioned accommodations versus modifications? Children under SpEd, people under special education can get accommodations too, but more specifically, they're also eligible for modifications. Modifications is you may be, like the definition says, you strategically change and arrange things to address the student's specific needs. If this student is dyslexic, they might need not only just bigger words, fewer words on a paper, they might need certain devices they use to follow along to cover up the rest of the page. They also need the additional time, and also they may not have, say, as many questions. The other one I told you, they may not have as many answer choices. This kid, depending on disability, not just dyslexia specifically, they may get questions worded a little differently, fewer questions, so it's not confusing. Their test might be shorter than other students. Some students may have longer word problems than them, and things like that, because this student is probably not performing on grade level, or all the extra stuff that's all the general education students get would be overstimulating or impede on their disability and prevent them from learning or having academic success. So these, again, you now teaching them in a way to their specific needs. So they may have a separate lesson plan. When they get pulled out, it mentions pull-outs and push-ins. When that teacher comes in, often called a co-teacher, they're going to use the same TEK or objective or whatever the main thing is that the teacher's going over, but they're going to break it down and present it they're supposed to anyway, present it in a completely different way for this specific kid, because what happens in the general ed class goes right over their head and they can't perform well. They can't process the information or comprehend it or things like that. So now they make their own lesson. The co-teacher makes their own lesson of how to teach this kid a skill, this specific skill based on the disability they have. So they're now learning it a completely different way than all the other kids. So that's why it's so individualized. And so because of the qualifications for SpEd and the process is different, under special education, those kids do get a lot more help and resources than kids in 504, mostly because under special ed umbrella, those kids have more severe or long-term disabilities, because under 504 you can have a disorder of anxiety, a diagnosis, sorry, of anxiety, or you could have recently broken your leg. And so say if a student just broke their leg, they wouldn't qualify for SpEd because of their broken leg, but they may temporarily qualify for 504 because now this kid is probably going to be late to class because their crutches or their wheelchair, whatever it is, they are going to miss a lot of class for doctor's appointments and things like that. So those are things that are a little more minor and temporary. The kid can learn, but they just might miss more class or be distracted because they're in pain or in doctor's appointments like that. So now you're just accommodating them. So you don't mark them tardy. You do give them more time because it takes them longer to get to class. So what I've seen this look like is if they have a physical disability, they're allowed to be to class late, and or you release them from class early so they're not in the hallways with all the other kids depending on the disability. And so now they're also missing part of class because you release them 10 minutes early to give them time to get across the building. So they don't need like special ed to change how they're learning or what they're learning. They just need more time to do what everybody else is doing. So I think that's the most clear example of how to differentiate those. Um, and so with special education, you get what they call here in Texas an IEP, which is an individual evaluation plan. And the individual evaluation plan is pages long, front and back, of what their disabilities are, what they look like, how they look for this specific student, and specific accommodations and modifications that this kid is to receive. What does testing look like? Where does they test? How do they test? Are they using paper or on the computer? What are they required to learn? Are they required to learn everything that they're going to be taught this year, or just specific main topics or objectives? Is very detailed, and that's why it's so many pages, and that's why most people don't know what's going on, because it's just so much information. But it's very detailed on how they're going to accommodate this kid getting the most out of their education in every way. What does PE look like? What does gym look like? What are their other electives look like? Should they be in art, or can they be outside? It's going to cover all the ins and outs of those students' needs. Now, different from 504, like I said, 504 is usually a little minor or temporary things like a physical disability due to an injury, recently had surgery. You can get it for anxiety because that can have effect on how you perform. And then you can get 504 for ADHD, depending on the severity and the impact, because you can be ADHD under 504 and you can be ADHD for special education. But depending on how severe it is and how much it affects their learning, they may start even as 504 and transition into special education, because 504, that service plan is not enough. It's not detailed enough. It's not enough support. And so then we need to bring out the big guns and do more, crack down, and really help this kid to succeed. And now they're in special education. And so special education would cover the learning disabilities, autism, visual impairments, like if this student is legally blind, things like that, or if their vision is rapidly declining. There's one called OHI, which is other health impairments. So other stuff that most people like, especially that are invisible disabilities, may fall under that. Those are usually chronic, long-term, not curable things that may affect their learning through their whole duration of their academic career. So in special ed, you get an IEP. There's no IEP in 504. And so if you remember having an IEP, but you didn't know you were in special education, and that's because I've had someone tell me like, oh, I had an IEP, but I wasn't in special education. Yes, you were. You can only get an IEP if you were in special education. And no shame either. It's just the reality. but because of the stigma, people and sometimes parents don't tell their kids they're in special ed. Also, when you have when you're under special ed, you also will have ARDs. These are annual. It's called with their, they refer to it as an ARD, but it's an annual review and dismissal committee, and these are meetings where you go over all the documents you have to sign of how you're going to help your kids. Because of this data, this is what we need to do, and then you can have review ARDs, which means everything we said in the first meeting and made all this, we need to make some changes because it wasn't working, it's not as effective, and you kind of go back to the drawing board. And then you have MDRs. I forgot what that stands for off the top of my head, so I'm not going to stutter trying to figure it out, but that's different from an R. The MDR is manifestation, determination, and I forgot the R. But basically, if the kid is not doing well and they're behaving poorly, you then have a meeting to determine is what's going on. Are there challenges due to the disability or something else? And that's necessary to be able to suspend them or expel them or have more severe consequences. Because if this student is ED, bipolar, schizophrenic, those would not be tested by the school. But if you tested them outside and the school is aware, certain behaviors, if they're due to those things, then that meeting will review that and say, like, this is what the disability looks like, so you cannot suspend the kid for that or whatever. It's not that simple, but that's kind of the gist of it. And then they also get BIPs, which stands for Behavior Intervention Plan. And again, if you have a student with severe behavior issues, that would not be under 504, that would be under SpEd. And this plan would be detailed. It may include a safety plan of when this child displays this specific behavior, this is what we do. When they do this, this is how we respond, and things like that. But again, it's very detailed and covers everything people need to know to keep the kids safe and everybody in the environment or the school safe, depending on what's going on. So SpEd is really where you see or hear most of the acronyms used because it's a lot of information and words, so they abbreviated everything. 504 is very simple, very temporary. They're both important and they both serve a purpose, but they are not the same. And so if you're just like ARD, EIP, I can't even say it. I didn't say too many letters. IEP, BIP, MDR, what are all these letters? I don't, like, you're still confused. If I made this worse, shameless plug, I made this and it's on Amazon. It's called Parent Teacher Conference Composition Notebook, hand created by me. In the beginning of this book, I have pages of all the acronyms used in special education so that you know what people are talking about and the definitions. I have the words and the definitions of everything in here, as well as questions to ask at your meetings. This is for you to take with you in those meetings so that you can document what's going on, what they're saying, ask questions and follow up and all those things. That's what that is for. So you can find some information that may help you understand more of what I'm talking about here. But the gist of this video was just to help you understand that 504 and SpEd are very different things. Very, very different things, very different programs, but they are federal and they are mandatory that people uphold them in the school. And you as parents have rights to fight for your kids' education. I want you to read the thing, as long as it is as confusing as it may be, read the whole thing to see if it even makes sense. Don't just agree to everything like I talked about in my last video. Don't say yes to everything. Ask questions. And if you're not sure what this is, even if they explained it, ask again, Google it, ask a friend, find an advocate. But just know those are two different programs, but it is mandatory if a child qualifies for them that they are getting the appropriate services. Hope this helps.